Well, since the pandemic and the lockdown, we've all become much more adept at online shopping. But it's a newish industry and the laws have not quite kept up with the digital marketplace. This is something that the Competition Commission is now probing. And to take a closer look at the industry, I'm joined by Arthur Goldstuck, CEO and founder of World Wide Worx. Arthur, thank you so much for joining us. You have just released a report on online retail, 30 billion rand last year, I think it says. So how much growth is that? Tell us a little bit more about the market before we delve into the problems.
Good afternoon, Sally. The growth was quite spectacular in 2020. Until then, we had seen between 20 and 30% growth a year, bearing in mind that was always coming off a fairly low base. So in 2017, there was less than 12 billion rand spent online in terms of online retail. In 2018, that went up to about 14 billion. And we expected that by 2020 to maybe reach the 20 billion mark if it carried on growing at 20-25% a year. But what instead happened last year was we saw 66% growth, which was the most significant growth that we'd seen in about 20 years. But 20 years ago, that was off almost a zero base. This time, it was off around 18 billion rand. So it reached 30.2 billion rand last year. And this year, we expect a similar growth in rand terms, although because it's a much higher number, the percentage will drop to around 30 to 40% for 2021.
So what are the Competition Commission's concerns? I mean, are they just looking at the big players in this market, the take-a-lots, the loot, the one-day onlys, or are there other issues?
Two things that the Competition Commission wants to look at. One is market dominance, and that dominance being abused by the kind of players you mentioned. Take-a-lot in particular in the e-commerce environment, because they account for about 1/3 of all online retail in South Africa, which makes them incredibly powerful, but also they provide a marketplace for smaller retailers. So their marketplace platform is in fact a place where a lot of small businesses go to sell online. And Take-a-Lot is able to dictate the terms and conditions, but also take a chunk of the sales. Depending on the product, it's anywhere from 4% to 18% of the sales value, what they call a success fee. And if your margins are lower than that, then that can be quite disastrous for your business. So it's those kind of things they want to look at on the one hand. But on the other hand, they also want to look at what's in the best interests of the economy and the consumer. And there they are looking at pricing issues, but also whether it's in the interests of the country and of transformation of the retail sector for too much to be in the hands of too few players.
But it's quite a broad mandate. It's quite a lot to look at. What do our laws say about online dominance? Do we have any?
We don't have any laws in that regard, which is precisely why the Competition Commission is looking at it. And also the Department of Trade, Industry and Competition also having released a policy statement in the last 2 weeks, pretty much aligned with the Competition Commission, and they are able to come in as almost partners of the Competition Commission in this kind of investigation. And they specifically are looking for the growth of jobs. So they will look for example, acquisitions or mergers being supportive of job creation rather than reducing jobs. So if there was a takeover, for example, of a major online retailer by another one, and it was going to result in loss of jobs, then they would probably step in and block that kind of merger. But all of that will come out of a more detailed investigation by the Competition Commission into whether there is market dominance and resultant abuse.
What does all this mean for the consumer? I presume that this probe is going to take quite a few months. But what does this mean for the consumer ultimately?
One of the ideas of the Competition Commission is that they want to protect the consumer by ensuring that market dominance doesn't result in price escalation. But the reality is that the opposite happens in South Africa. The more powerful the players are, the more likely they are to force prices down. And that has been a strategy in the United States in particular, and Amazon has been responsible for that kind of strategy of dropping prices to force competitors out of the market, or to force them to come onto their own platform. Otherwise, they can't survive. So that is one element that the Competition Commission wants to avoid, but also where a player is a monopoly provider of a particular service or product, that they don't push the prices too high. Now, we haven't seen that in South Africa, so it's unlikely that the inquiry will result in lower costs. In some cases, like ride sharing, for example, the costs are probably too low. The consumer is having almost a free ride at the expense of the riders and the car owners. And that may very well be adjusted by the Competition Commission, saying that you have to protect the worker as well. And that's where the Department of Trade, Industry and Competition will come into it and say these prices are not sustainable for the worker in that sector. And you've got to have a floor price aside from sometimes putting a ceiling price to products and services.
Oh, thank you so much for your time. That was Arthur Goldstuck, CEO and founder of World Wide Worx.